All this airtime you got. Phew. You do have a quorum. You're missing two. You're missing Chuck and Monica. And you have Michelle here tonight who was not able to make it the last time, so I will let you do your agenda, Jack. You might want to let Michelle introduce herself, though.
Okay.
Actually, for each meeting, you should make sure that there's either a statement of every member present so that it's recorded. And potentially if someone is listening in by phone, they will be able to know who's on the meeting. Either that or a roll call, either one works. And then if you do take any votes at any point, make sure you do the roll call so those listening by phone can know who's saying what.
So Carol, will you be with us in all of these meetings?
As long as you're doing Zoom, yeah.
Okay.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Well, why don't we just do the roll call quickly? It'll allow us to delay. Oh, wait, here's Chuck.
Yep.
Chuck, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you, Jack?
Good. So we've got Chuck, Brand, Ed Bowen, Phil Crawford, Michael Folcarelli, Michelle Stricker, and we're just waiting for, we got Carol and myself, we're just waiting for Monica. But while we're waiting, or hopefully she can join Michelle, last week, everybody just talked a little bit about, who they were, how long they'd been in town, and perhaps you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah, I listened to the last week's meeting or the prior meeting so I could catch up a little bit. I've been a full-time resident for about 4 years. I've been coming here summers for 32 years. I grew up north of Boston, but I lived in Austin, Texas for 35 years, where I raised 4 children who are now grown and don't talk to me much. They're all on their own now, but they come here whenever they can get a chance to. My background is in corporate finance, banking, and journalism as a freelance reporter. And I haven't been doing much since I've been here, especially with COVID, but I really wanted to get involved in the town. I'm on the board of the library, and I'm also on the recreation committee.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
So, Carol, we should call to order. Maybe we already have. Looks like it's 6:32.
Sounds good.
So I guess first off, I presume everybody's read the minutes from our last meeting. Any comments or questions on those?
I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes as written and received.
Excellent. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent.
Okay, just let the record show that it was unanimous.
And Michelle seconded that?
Yes.
There were actually 2. I heard 2 people
Oh, whatever.
speak up. But that's okay. Michelle was fine.
So we probably have a shorter agenda tonight than we'll have, but I thought we'd talk a little bit about the process. I know a number of you. Here's Monica. Hey, welcome, Monica.
Hi, sorry. Hi.
Welcome. So we now have a full.
Thank you.
quorum. Welcome. We just approved the minutes from the last meeting, Monica, and we're gonna get into the agenda. I was just gonna say we're, as it's early and we haven't had much outreach to either the town leaders or voters, residents, etc. I'm not sure how much public comment we'll have, but I thought communication would be a great way to start. You've all seen that Carol set up a group email for us. that is LC Charter Review at littlecomptonri.org. And
Yes.
that will, so if anybody has suggestions or recommendations for areas that we should review, that'll come into that one central email. And Carol has set it up, or she will acknowledge all of those emails. So we're really not to acknowledge them, not to talk about them in subset, not to respond. In essence, that acknowledgement is basically saying that this commission will take them up for review at our next meeting. And so we'll
Yes.
all see them, Carol, right? They'll all come to our
Yes.
individual emails. We'll just have them. So when we get together, we can go through them.
And excuse me, Jack. So, and that would go on the agenda as correspondence, Carol?
If we do get any, we will actually list them out. So let's say I sent one to you. You
Yep.
would list it, email communications from Carol Wardell questioning whatever section I questioned. So that the public is warned that I've sent something and what I'm questioning.
And that would go on to the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Similar to how the communications or consent items are on the council agendas.
Okay.
So everybody will see, and I'm not sure how many there'll be, but everybody will see all of these. And I thought really it might be helpful for just a few minutes to talk about how word gets out, Carol, about this process that's ongoing. And again, others have participated before, but I presume we will, and we shared that one memo from Bob Mushin, but we'll, as we go through the process, reach out to the town leaders, the people in town government, and invite them to come to future meetings as they are, as their areas of involvement would suggest. But we'd also possibly create posters or an announcement or some other communication that would encourage any and all residents in town, voters, should they have a suggestion for possible review, to reach out to the commission via that email. Is that something that's been done in the past?
Well, in the past, they haven't had the email opportunity. That's something recent that's been a benefit for the board. Other groups have relied on the posting of their agendas and what subjects they're going to be talking about for the public to see an interest and attend if they wanted to. You can reach a point where you've got several subjects that you'd like to talk about, where you might want to put an additional larger announcement out, inviting the public to attend. And the public's always invited to attend any of your meetings because they're all open. But you will probably discover that there's not going to be a lot of public input in that sense. There will be a handful of people that are very passionate about certain sections of the charter that when you say you're going to discuss that section, they'll probably attend. But I think your bulk of your comments are going to come from the administration and from the actual staff of the town hall or the public safety complex, the school, all of the departments. That's where your bulk of your comments are going to come from.
Okay. And so as a, public forums, and the fact that these are posted in advance with the agenda with potential items, and they'll know we're in the process, and people that have comments will reach out that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, the fact that it's now on the website with a little announcement about your email, that's a good step in the right direction. if you get to a point where you think you've got some really important things you'd like to talk about, whether it be the finance areas or any area for that matter, we certainly can do another type of announcement on the website, giving people just another heads up that, this section is going to be talked about at this upcoming meeting.
So that seems pretty straightforward. Any other thoughts or recommendations from the commissions?
No, that sounds good.
I would suggest that you each, if you haven't done it already, take your copy of the charter and highlight everything that you may have a question about. That may be a beginning part for you to, where do you step from first? Might give you an idea of who to invite first for town officials. I did reach out to both Bob and Tony to see if they were available for your next meeting, should you decide that. Bob said he was available, but Tony was too busy. I didn't get an answer from him.
Okay. Well, that's a great suggestion, Carol. And thank you for reaching out. As it came out today, you may not have seen it, but there was a memo that Bob Mushin had sent out pretty recently. I mean, it was in November at the end of the year, and he sent it to the town council, and it basically highlighted a number of areas that we might review for roles and responsibilities, clarity, etc. And I thought, knowing, not that much about how the town is organized and run, that might be a good way to start. One, because somebody that's been in a leadership role for a long time here in town has thought that given some of the changes in the financial area, these areas might be, ripe for review. How are the people doing it? We'll talk a little bit more about that. And so I thought it might be a good start for us to invite Bob to our next meeting, and possibly Tony, who's the town administrator, not that new, but still relatively new as a function here in town. And just so she doesn't think she can escape, invite Carol as well as a participant to just, get any thoughts they might have of areas that we might review and get at. I spent some time. Carol was very helpful. I talked with, after he commented at our last session with Larry Anderson, and I'm going to meet with Scott Morrison later this week, just, on the process, how we might be most helpful. And then when I looked at those 3 reports that Carol sent out, it is pretty straightforward. The role is obviously to, review what areas get teed up to review and make suggestions on how they might be approved and improved. And Bob had highlighted a few areas among the solicitor, the assessor, the finance department, public works, police, and fire. And, if you agree, I thought having him, give us some kind of granularity on those things at our next meeting might be a great way to kind of get going.
That's a great idea. Can you read the memo? I think I lost you a minute there. Can you read his memo, or could you just give us the number of the areas Bob highlighted to you?
If you want, I can hold it up and you can make notes on it.
Okay. Oh, you know what? I do have that. I'm sorry. I do have that. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't, it just said these are the areas, and
Yeah.
I thought if he's open, it sounds like through Carol, he might be free at our next meeting, that he could just share, and I think it might get us off to a nice start. And these are obviously some critical, segments of the town government. So,
I think that's a great idea. He had only highlighted 3 when I spoke with him, so I will go back to that other chart and look at the other ones.
okey doke. Any other thoughts on that? Does that all seem like a pretty good start?
Yeah,
Okay.
Denise, the assessor, has reached out to me. I volunteered at the assessor's office for 6 months last year and developed a real rapport. And so I thought maybe it would be good if I just sort of casually sat down and talked with her, before she writes stuff up, to see if I can get a gist for what some of her concerns are. Would that be okay?
I guess, I think her writing things up so everybody sees it is probably what you intend, right? So.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't, there wouldn't be anything that y'all didn't know. Just try to see if she can focus on, some specific areas, and then, she'd be writing them up and submitting them to our committee, to our commission.
Mhm.
And I think, Denise is probably someone, if the financial area, I may get this wrong, Carol, so please, and anybody else, please stop me. But we've got a number of people that are either new in their roles, or how they got into those roles via election or appointed has changed. So I would think in the finance area, we'd probably, invite Denise to one of our meetings so we can all.
Yeah, that's probably better. That'd be better. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I think you should invite all of them, maybe not at the same meeting, but you should definitely have Joe DeSantis, who's the finance director. You should have Denise Cosgrove, who's your assessor. Tony, who's the administrator, Bob as the council president, each of the chiefs. But I think you should invite all of those department heads, the school as well, and give them some airtime. Ask them if they wouldn't mind putting down in writing what their major concerns are, because that way you've got something to go by when they're in front of you. But that also gives you the opportunity to kind of query them a little closer on what they've written.
Yeah, I think that would be a great suggestion, and our plan. Seems like we've got a lot of time, but I'm sure we're meeting once a month. I'm sure we'll run out of time if we're not organized about getting the key priority leaders here in town. So to be with us, Mary Ann Harrington, probably.
Mary Jane, she's no longer in office, and if she's interested, she may be able to give you some insight, but she's retired now, so I don't know if she'd be
Okay.
wanting to come in.
Okay. Well, we'll stick with the people that are in their roles as we get started.
It might be a good idea, you're contemplating having Bob and potentially Tony come to your next meeting. Maybe you should jot down a couple of department heads for each of your subsequent meetings, and then that way you've firmed up who's going to be where and what section you'll be talking about during that particular meeting. That might give us the ability to post a little bit more for the public to see and potentially have more involvement.
Yeah, great idea. How do we, you mentioned as you ran off, the budget committee, the school. Is there kind of a hierarchy or a lineup that you'd recommend?
Well, I can send you a list of the boards and commissions that we keep. That's everyone who's an elected official, elected bodies, and appointed officials. And that would give you an idea of who all they are and whom you feel is most important to come before you to answer some questions.
Okay. So I'm sorry.
That's what I think she just said, good idea.
Yeah, good idea.
And then we should probably schedule them into the calendar. And which was what Carol was suggesting, that we would just schedule them into the calendar and proceed along with that.
Well, if you do that, that gives you the opportunity to send that out to them. And for them to say, oh, I'll be out of the country that particular date. Can you give me a different date? And you can rearrange things.
Mhm.
But it gives them a little warning of when you'd like to have them come before you.
And Carol, when that's arranged and they come, you had suggested earlier that we ask them if there are some key areas of review or concerns, to put that in writing to the commission, so we have that in advance, and then all of that would be posted.
That'd be helpful for you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm still a little fuzzy on communication. So if we look at that list that you're going to send to us,
Mhm.
and we say, okay, here's a suggested hierarchy, and we send that around to everybody on the call or on the Zoom call right now, and you, that's okay, right? Or does that?
Sure. Well, for scheduling a meeting, you're okay for doing that. What I would suggest is you, meaning you, Jack, take that list and take the dates that you're gonna propose for meetings. Because at this point, I think you've just got this one and one other scheduled.
Yeah, I got a couple of other proposals.
Okay. I would suggest that you sit down and insert the roles and the people and the departments that you would like to be at whatever meeting. Circulate that with the rest, saying these are the meeting dates I'm planning on and the proposal for who should attend. So long as you don't discuss the sections of the charter itself, the business of your entity, then you're okay with scheduling that way. That's allowed. But beyond that, if you start getting into, well, I'd really rather talk about, I don't know, the police department and what they're doing, or the fire department and what they're doing. That's when you get into gray areas of starting to pick apart. So it's best if you, as the chair, send something out and say, here, this is what I am proposing. Probably you're not going to have much dissension amongst the troops, because you're all in the same boat. You're all just trying to get input from people.
Yeah.
Carol, can I ask a question? Excuse me.
Yes.
Is it best to send out essentially invitations to 2 department heads at a time instead of 6, and the Jack would send out, can you 2 come on this day? Can you 2, like that? Or is it just whoever, how would you suggest it's sent out?
Yeah,
If
well,
you send out,
I would suggest that you determine amongst yourselves. First layer would be Jack saying, this is what I think we should do. And
Yeah.
I would say, depending on how long you want to meet, 2, no more than 3 a night.
Yeah.
If it was a smaller department, recreation committee or something. I mean, they
Right.
have function, but they probably don't have a lot of change that they need to do to give to you.
right, I see.
So you could probably get away with 3 boards that particular night if you wanted to.
Mhm, mhm.
And then once that's firm, then that would then be sent out a message to all of those departments saying, this is our calendar and these are the dates that we would like to see you attend. If anyone has a conflict, please contact us immediately, and then you rearrange as you need to.
I see.
And if we send that out, should we reference the section of the existing, whatever it is, commission or the charter that we'd like them to look at? 'Cause they might not be familiar that there's a homeroom charter.
Oh, yeah. It's been going on for years.
They're familiar.
Well, for instance, the library, nobody knew that there was such a thing.
Well, the library is unique in that it's all brand new. All the members are brand new right now, so that's
Right.
unique.
Yeah.
But yes, when it goes out, it would be, we're going to be discussing your section of the charter on XYZ date. We would like for you to be in attendance, and please submit something in writing in advance of the meeting. And I would suggest maybe a week in advance of the meeting, so that you would have a chance to receive it and individually absorb what they're going to say so that you're prepared for questions at the meeting. And I can work with Jack and Mike on that. That's not a problem.
Great.
Great.
So Carol, you'd work with us and figuring out how we'd invite these people once we come up with a lineup.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but I just wanted to suggest that in line with what Carol mentioned, when I was on this before, we used the framework of the charter itself, breaking it up into sections and then inviting people within those sections. We might
Yeah.
be hampered just in the Zoom era, and it will take longer. My experience with Zoom meetings is that they take much more time than in-person meetings.
Yeah.
But, section 6 would be those people, who fall within that section, for example. And we just progressed one through and taking them in order until we had heard from everyone who wanted to appear, from the library to the town sergeant to whomever it was. Some people chose not to appear. They didn't have any input that they wanted to provide, and other people did.
That sounds good. Orderly.
Yeah,
Goes in line.
works for me. We cover
Carol-
all of the ground, I think, right?
Carol, do you have any feel for when we're finally allowed to meet in person? Are things progressing in that area?
They are and they are not. They are progressing. Hypothetically speaking, a board this small could potentially be in a room, socially distanced, and meet together, but we're still mandated to have this Zoom and live streaming. So it makes it difficult to do what they refer to as a hybrid meeting because we don't really have the right equipment to do it.
How about outside?
Doesn't matter. Even if you're outside, you have to have it. And until until the governor changes the order that we're required to have either telecommunications or electronic communications for the public to participate, our hands are tied.
Okay.
You should get a T-shirt printed that says that on the front. I've heard you give that same.
Our hands are tied.
Okay, so well, we've got Bob and hopefully Tony for the next meeting. I'll take a crack at next invitees by sort of the charter section. I think that's, how many sections is that? Is that 12 or 13?
It goes up to like 1,000 is the last set of numbers.
But there are groups. There's articles.
They're in groups. So it's
And the
really like,
groups are 11.
yeah,
There's 11 groups, and then within the groups, there are probably, 8 to 10 sections. Some are 3. But there are 11 sections, articles.
Yeah.
That are also then broken down into, I'm sorry, so there's 11 articles that are then broken down into sections.
Right.
So you're saying we would invite people that would essentially be pertaining to those articles, town officials, boards and commissions, things like that.
some you may want to do a couple of nights rather than, I don't know whether you want both police and fire and
Sure.
DPW and, all of that in one night. I don't
Right. That
have a
sounds
feel.
too much.
It may make a difference as to whether or not when you invite them, if they all say, I don't have anything really to talk about, well, that makes your life easy. That'll be an easy night. But if you end up with them sending you 5 pages of suggestions, then I don't think you'll have that, but that was an extreme.
So you'd play, if you had a big group like in one of those segments, you'd certainly plan on, no more than 2 that evening, if that many, maybe just 1, right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, it depends on how long you want your meeting to be. You could probably get away with 2. Especially if neither of those 2 people have much to change or much to propose for change.
Yeah.
You almost have to get a good feel for the first round of invitees. If you send it out telling everyone when you propose for them to come and ask for initial feedback on, do you think you have much for us to talk about or little or nothing, then at least you might have an idea as to whether or not you need to split a specific night up into 2 nights or whether you can combine a couple together because nobody really has any comment.
Yeah, exactly.
I suppose there, you might hear from one group in town government that there was an issue that was sort of a cross-function area that they wanted to have some sort of review or clarity, and the segment of the government that was, didn't think that they needed much more clarity than they had. Has that ever come up? That's, if you follow me?
I do follow you. I don't recall where we've had that in the past. This year, you may have something like that only because there's so many moving pieces this particular year. You've got the new finance director. You have a relatively new town administrator who's been in the role for a couple of years now. So there may be things that he sees as needs to be changed. And because of that, you have some changes that have happened with the role of the town council president, handing some things over to the administrator. You went from an elected assessors board to a single tax assessor. So you've had a lot of little changes in the finance department that all of those things affect each other. They also affect the budget committee and those financial town meeting reviews. So I think that's where your bulk of your review is going to be and your bulk of potential suggestions are going to come from.
Right.
So you're probably going to end up wanting to put those in a series of meetings and maybe even invite all of the participants at a couple of them so that you've got more input should they choose to come and give more input. But those would be the ones that I would focus on asking them what they feel they need for changes. And then it'll kind of be like, just throwing everything in a pot and trying to figure out who's suggested what and what makes sense to you. And then at some point in time, it's really just you, the 7 of you, looking at everything, looking at all of your comments and saying, well, this comment over here is really in left field. It makes absolutely no sense, but these 2 over here make perfect sense. So let's see how we can work those into the charter.
Okay.
I think to the extent that the town council is the body that proposes the changes to the electorate in town, in some respect, we're working for the town council. And so to take what the town council has prioritized as being the issues that they want to see makes an awful lot of sense. Is when you get down to something like Article 7 with boards and commissions, and there are 10 boards and commissions, it may be the case that 2 of the boards and commissions want to appear and might have something that they want some input, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the council even has to. They can take it under advisement, but they don't have to put it to the electorate. But I think your sense for having, my opinion is that your sense for having, starting with Bob Mushin in his memo and what the council is thinking about the changes that they want to see makes an awful lot of sense. And I think that my hope is that as we progress through these things, it kind of just develops organically and it's not that big a deal. I'm curious how Zoom might hinder our ability to get through an agenda of an evening. But I think the most meat on the bone is going to be what the council wants, because ultimately the council are the ones who propose the changes.
I have found in Zoom meetings that the agenda is stuck to much more firmly. There's a lot less chit chat and things go smoothly, and there's, an undeniable record of everything that happens. I think I don't know, I think it's been good.
Well, I think that's that was kind of in my head when I thought about Bob. I came across that note that was just at the end of the year, and there were a handful of things, and he's the leader of the council, so it's a good place to start. It may well be that we invite the whole council, as we get into it. But and I suspect when we get into it, we start going down through, the department heads, there'll be plenty of action, and just prioritize where we can, add the most value, I suppose.
I know Bob did ask all of the counselors to take one of those sections that he had referred to and for them to do a review and make recommendations. I haven't seen any come back yet, but you're certainly free to reach out to the counselors themselves and say, I know you've been taking some time to review certain sections of the charter. Do you have input for us? And that might give you another layer.
Yeah. So if I do recall seeing, so if someone was, if Bob had asked someone to look at police or someone to look at the fire department, might make sense to have the counselor and the fire chief there at the same time, or they could all be there should they want to be, but to formally ask that, or?
You could. I mean, there's nothing that you can do that's wrong, really. I mean, you're just looking for as much input from people as possible. So if you want to invite the council every single time because that's the way you want it to be, then you can. I don't think they'll come every single time, but I mean, you certainly are free to do that if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I guess, and I'm way open to suggestion. By the way, Carol, nobody's ever said to me there's nothing I could do that would be wrong. So thank you for that. But I'm sure we all want to be respectful of time. There's commissions and the council and, the people in government that work so hard. So, I'm struggling to figure out what's the best way to get through it in the most organized way and get to a place where we're digging in on the stuff that will add the most value. I think all of these suggestions, starting with Bob and Tony, if they can do it, and then, going, through, the biggest departments first, or getting to the places where there are the most potential changes would be a great way to start. And
I think Ed is probably right. Once you start having those in-depth discussions with Bob and Tony, and then looking through the sections that Bob had mentioned as being needy, I think you're going to see it grow organically. I think you're going to find, all right, so for our next meeting, we've already invited person X, but we're going to set aside time to talk about this section as well. And your agendas will grow that way.
Yeah, I bet that's right.
Well, and I would anticipate that, if Bob and Tony come to the next meeting and they address the issues that, after we do the canvassing of the town, we talk to some of the departments, they may need to come back and refine that or see what other input there is from other sources. And they may even think of other things that they might want to add. So it might not be the final, I wouldn't think it'd be the final conversation with them at all.
Oh, it definitely won't be final. Usually what happens with the charter review commissions are they go through a process similar to this, whether they gather the data. Then you go through a process where you decide what's most important that you want to make recommendations on. And then you fine tune that to come up with those actual recommendations. And at that point, you go through a series of other meetings where you invite the public and you invite the departments again to come back and look at what you're playing with, what you're considering, and get more feedback from people. Sometimes you put something together and you invite the department heads to come back and they say, ooh, if you do that, that's gonna cause this problem over here. Or they look at it and they say, that makes perfect sense. Why did we not think about this before? You know, it's a review, give and take the entire time.
That's helpful. Thanks.
I would ask Jack, if you, when we are sending out invitations to people, just by way of efficiency, if it would be possible, or my suggestion or my request would be that if they can provide in advance with specificity what it is that they would like to see, it, you know, give us the opportunity to review that before the meeting rather than have to then have perhaps a subsequent follow-up meeting. Because we could ask the questions the first time around rather than have to digest it and come back to it the second time.
Yeah, great idea. I think, you know, Carol had suggested maybe we get a week in advance their input in terms of any, you know, particular suggestions, things they want to address when they come and join us. And so we'll be, you know, we can do a little homework in advance and they'll do some homework. And I think that certainly would be more productive, certainly for me. Any other thoughts on the process? You know, and this will be the start. I'll get in the next you know, week a suggested timeline, and we'll try to map out the key areas versus the sections of the charter and send it out. Any other suggestions?
I just think that was a very good idea to try to get their input and their questions and their concerns. And then from there, Jack, then you would be able to kind of marry up, okay, these two we would invite on this one because their concerns are somewhat similar, or it wouldn't be a big jump. And to get the input ahead of time, then you'd be able to kind of decide who to invite based on the input that's most pertinent to those inquiries. And I think that's a good suggestion that he made, to get the input ahead of time.
Yeah, I agree.
So if you ended up having, I don't know, 50 questions, for instance, then you'd say, okay, these 5 questions for these 2 departments, let's invite these 2 department heads and address those 5 questions or concerns.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking we may be, I'm just, you know, if we invite people to come in a segment, we've sort of lined them up to come. I guess we can, you know, add others to that are relevant to that discussion to specifically be there as well. So we'll have to.
Sure.
I think as the thing kind of organically grows, we'll have to allow time to do that. So we have all the people in the room that we want to discuss.
With that in mind, you might want to ask for a 2-week period before for
Yeah.
something in writing, because that gives you time to change up who's going to be in attendance if you needed to.
Yep.
You know, I mean, it's good to have some basic idea of what meetings you want to have, what sections talked about, but you also want to be flexible.
Yeah. And be able to add to or move around should you need to.
Mhm.
Great suggestion, 2 weeks. So we had public input as an agenda item. I'm not sure.
There's nobody here. Just
nobody-
us.
I didn't think that would be a long segment, but so we had talked about, in terms of, before we kind of go to any other items or adjournment, getting together on Monday nights. That works for Carol generally, and she's got a lot more of these meetings than certainly I do. And we'd kind of gotten into a lineup of maybe the 3rd or 4th Monday in a given month, which would be, June 21st, well, we have May, what is it, May 20,
May 24th were scheduled.
May 24th is scheduled. I had, and I'll send out into the future if that works for people, but I was thinking either June 21st or the 28th, maybe the 21st if people are traveling over the 4th of July. Maybe that's wishful thinking in this COVID era, but
I like the idea of the 21st. That sounds good.
Yes, 21st is good.
Yep.
21st is good for me too.
okay. So, and I'll send that. Ed, does that work for you?
It certainly does. Yes, sorry. I was,
Michael?
Yes.
So we'll shoot for the 21st, and then in July, either the 19th or the 26th.
Why don't you say it's always going to be the third Wednesday? I mean, the third Monday. I don't know why I said Wednesday. If that seems to be a Monday evening and the third Monday of each month, at least that way you've got some, I don't know,
You don't have to remember as much.
formula you're going by.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it'd probably help the people who we're inviting too if they can't make a certain meeting.
Mhm, mhm.
So I'll send around a note to everybody with the third Monday going out through the end of the year and a tentative lineup of departments to include on those in those months at that time. And if that suggests, if that makes just, I'm sure I'll get it wrong. So please make any suggestions or additions to that. And we'll together we'll come up with a lineup for the rest of the year.
That sounds good.
And Carol, you had, I think, said before that in previous reviews, they started with monthly meetings. Can you give us a sense how long those meetings go? Or did you not also say that people added second meetings as you got towards the end, just because?
Some groups have gone to meeting twice a month rather than just once a month. Those were the groups that had quite a lot that they wanted to propose, and they had a lot of moving figures. They wanted to make sure that they reviewed those sections as closely as possible and then drafted something for a recommendation. So it took them a while to do that, because some years we've had 14 plus recommendations. And other years you've had 0 or 1 or 2. So it really depends on how intense you're going to get with your review and your suggestions.
Yeah. Lest that scare anybody away, if you look at the previous reports that came from the commission, some were, really clarifying in nature. We're not trying to propose a whole different, lineup here. So, but I'm sure when you get into some that require some language, we have the very able services of our secretary, Mr. Folcarelli, so I can't imagine it will be, burdensome for us. But okay, well, that's helpful. Any other, business that we ought to address as we kind of begin the rollout and start to invite people to these next meetings?
So when you get a confirmation of the invitation, that goes on the agenda. Carol?
Not really. I
Not
mean, that's really just in-house,
Okay.
for scheduling. You're gonna, on whatever agenda they're coming to is going to be a statement of what section you're talking about, what department you've invited. If there's anything unique that they've suggested, that'll go on the agenda so the public is warned. But in terms of them just saying, yes, I can be there, that doesn't need
No,
to,
but, what I'm saying is that if, so let's say that Jack invites Bob Mushin to the first meeting, and Bob sends a letter sends something written that he wants to discuss at that meeting. Is that included in the agenda that's
What
posted?
if anyone is to send you something that says, here are the following items that I would like to see you look at or discuss, then yes, that would be something that would be an agenda item. But
Okay,
if it was simply just a statement of, yes, I will come and I'd love to talk about section XYZ, then that's just an internal communication confirming that they'll be there.
okay.
And then as we get a week away, at least in terms of when you distribute the next meeting and the agenda for the meeting, then Bob will be, one of the key agenda items, right?
Yes, yes. You'll probably note the sections that he's put in his initial memo that you copied already, that you'll likely talk about those at a minimum. And you will make a statement of the fact that he's been invited to participate. And then if Tony is also agreeable to come, you will make a statement that the administrator will be in attendance to discuss those same sections.
And anything else he might want to add to that?
Yeah. Mhm.
So Carol, so this, this note that Bob sent out in November,
Mhm.
he highlights, a handful of sections. Some of them are quite small and precise. When we are in the meeting, he may not give us any additional detail 2 weeks before. We'll ask him if he comes, are there things that he would like to address or us to address? And can he give us a heads up in writing 2 weeks before? So forearmed with that, then when we come to the meeting, we'll just sort of draw him out on some of the areas that he thought or thinks need clarification or adjustment, and hear him out. That's how you get through the process.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, that seems pretty straightforward.
Well, I would think too, in terms of, if we go through, Bob has several suggestions or some really, detailed suggestions. It'll be nice to have it on YouTube, so you don't have to, so Mikhail, you don't have to take, copious notes or be worried that you might miss something, because you can always go back and look at the YouTube. I've found that helpful.
Well, Michael's the one who's taking the notes.
Well, I mean, Michael, yeah.
But you're still, as the secretary, jotting down notes. But you also need to remember that any minutes that are taken, no matter what board or commission it is, they're not verbatim. They're not meant to be verbatim. They're meant to give a good enough summary of what occurred for discussion. And then if any votes are taken, those are detailed. But in terms of discussion, most of your minutes are probably going to say, we discussed section 603 in detail. Suggestion XYZ was made, then move on. We discussed section 804 and suggestions were made. You're not going to get into too much detail there unless there's something specific that somebody said, you really need to change this sentence, this paragraph in the following manner. And even then you might just refer to the fact that their comments and suggestions were placed on file. And then the person reading the minutes would know you talked about it, but then would be guided to the file to see the detail.
You just follow Carol's excellent notes that she takes on the council.
Yeah.
Follow that pattern and you'll be fine.
So I think maybe Michael asked this, Carol, but in terms of inviting Tony and Bob, you've already, is there a formal process to that? We'd like, if you'd be so kind to submit your areas of concern a couple of weeks in advance. Should we draft something or do we just kind of do it.
It wouldn't hurt to draft something that's gonna be your standard template.
Oh, yeah,
That's,
good
that
idea.
says to, and whatever the department head is that you're gonna be inviting, or multiple department heads. Have a line that says the Charter Review Commission will be reviewing section, and you fill in whatever the section is, on such and such a date at such and such a time. We would like to invite you to attend and offer your input. We also ask that you would give us any written suggestions or comments or concerns 2 weeks prior to the meeting. Please
Jack,
respond to your availability.
Jack, we can meet together and come up with a template for that and then
Yeah. Great.
send it out.
Okay. Okay. Any other business? Thank you all for your time and help. And if there isn't any other business, we'll adjourn. I'll send out those dates for the rest of the year and a suggested timeline, and enjoy your week.
Thank you. You also.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take
Yeah,
care.
great.
Okay, he declared the meeting adjourned at 7:25, Mike.